wanasiasa na wajumbe ambao wanataka kupotosha Wakenya. Wacha kila mtu abebe msalaba yake.
All right, and that's what the former Prime Minister had to say, and also we've heard what Honorable Cherargei also had to say. Now, let me start with you, Barack Muluka. And we've had politicians use words like showbiz, that what we're seeing in the arrests and, what's happening in the fight against graft is showbiz or ethnic profiling. Now, of course, there is a danger if this is indeed what is happening, but there's also a danger if this is also not happening, but politicians would want to make it look like that. What's your opinion? What's your view on the fight of graft so far?
To the extent, thank you, Mike, to the extent that we have not convicted many of the so-called big fish, like I heard the panelists discussing a little earlier, I think the notion of showbiz would seem to hold some water. But I think we start gravitating into very dangerous space when legislators, particularly those in the Senate, which is essentially a watchdog house, start seeming to be advocating against the fight against corruption. Mm-hmm. And the narrative that we are getting is very dangerous. It's a narrative that seeks to whip up ethnic sentiment. And I do agree with those who have said that you should carry your own cross. And the ethnicization of this whole thing then tends to defeat what is otherwise a very noble goal. And we have seen that in recent times, a certain former senator who is from a community other than that of the senator who has just been speaking, has been put away for 2 years over corruption. We have seen that there is a case against a certain Muzonzili who is not from that community. We have seen that there is an MP, Mr. Waluke, who has had a case, and there have been many other examples that we could talk about. Mm-hmm. And so this, I think, is something that should be resisted. The political class must be discouraged from trying to behave as if it owns people and going back to people to whip up ethnic sentiment each time they seem to be caught with the hand in the tail.
All right. Michael Agwanda, of course, there's a huge danger if people indeed believe what some of the politicians say, especially when it comes to the war against graft. And we've always had this ethnic card pulled out conveniently, and this could be another convenience. But I think for the electorate, we need to have an ability to perceive and tell, regardless of the fact whether these cases have been, we've had convictions or not, but we need to have an ability to perceive and at least call out our politicians when they seem to be lying to us. How do we go about that? Because there are those who possibly may feel that they would want to support that kind of narrative.
It would make sense if a senator in Rift Valley, in Coast, for example, or in Nairobi, that is not coming from a specific community where an individual is claiming that they are being profiled, comes from. If they came out and said that indeed there's a community that is being targeted, that would make a lot of sense. But if the senator that is perhaps coming from the same area as some of the people that have been arraigned in court is talking about it, then you can see ethnicity one in one, and which is quite a danger to the society. And to the country as a whole. Owing to the last general election, Kenya was really divided within, from different communities. Doing business was really difficult. And after the handshake, we've seen a unified country, a country that is moving forward and is growing. And when you find politicians coming back and saying that our community is being targeted, it can tell you how they think. Unfortunately, for this specific speaker or senator that has just spoken here, that specific senator is a lawyer. And he knows that talking about matters that are already in court is not very good. And secondly, is not a judge and is not holding brief for any of these people that has been taken to court. And for that reason, he has no locus standi to even say that indeed these people will get out, that 99.9% of these people will get out. Who is he? Is he the judge handling that case? You can see how misleading he is to the country and to his legal profession that he swore to defend and to uphold the integrity of the constitution of this country. Unfortunately, indeed, these are the kind of people that can take a country to where it's not supposed to be. I think this should be condemned with the strongest term possible, and any other politician that will think in this manner. And when you see a number of people being arrested, as I've said here before, from our same community, and as Barack has enumerated here very clearly, it is not only from that community that people are being arrested. Barack has mentioned a number of people that are being arrested on corruption. We have even the chairman of National Land Commission that has been arrested and taken to court. It's not coming from the same community that this senator is alleging that it's being profiled in this case. But when individuals are arrested, and when the amount of money that we're talking about here, staggering amount of money in terms of billions, have been lost while people are dying in the hospitals, and then you say our community is being profiled, you must be a beneficiary of that loot for you to make that kind of statement.
Let me come to you, Karanja Kabage, and from a legal background and a perspective, help us understand, by the time a case is brought to court, what has had to go in the background? Because, I mean, it's easy for me to stand up here and profile and say that certain people are being targeted. However, from a lawyer's perspective, there must be certain things that must be met before a case is brought to court. So even if we had people from two communities, for example, in court, there would have to be a legal background or a legal foundation as to why they're in court.
Well, thank you, Mike. First, let's be very clear. In this country, we have what is called the doctrine of separation of powers, where you have got the executive branch of government headed by the president. We have the judiciary headed by the chief justice, and we have the legislature that is headed by the two speakers, the National Assembly, by the Tory and the Senate. Now, when it comes to a question of the executive branch of the government, it is the one that is responsible of the Director of Public Prosecution and the Director of Criminal Investigations. The two are mandated by law and the Constitution. One, the Director of Criminal Investigations is supposed to conduct investigations on alleged crimes that have been committed. Once he is satisfied that truly there is a case against a certain individual, he takes it to the Director of Public Prosecution. The Director of Public Prosecution is an independent office that is supposed to evaluate the evidence that is submitted to him by the DCI. And only when he is satisfied that there is a case that he can successfully prosecute in court does he charge a particular individual. So, however, when now it comes to a question of evidence, it is for the prosecution to prove beyond reasonable doubt, particularly if it's a criminal case, before the judge. And of course, the accused has the advantage of being represented by a counsel, and he has to defend himself before the judge, and the judge will listen to the evidence from both the prosecution and the defense, and will come to the conclusion, yes, you, the charged, are innocent, and therefore discharge you. You, the accused, are guilty, and therefore I convict you. So that is the process that goes on. Now, when it comes to a question of the politicians, whether they are lawyers or non-lawyers, making wild statement that the people that are being charged is tantamount to political profiling, that should be treated with the contempt it deserves. Because, first and foremost, you may not even be seized of the evidence that the Director of Public Prosecution has in order for him to charge so-and-so. And don't also forget that the credibility of the Director of Public Prosecution and DCI is also on the line, because you can't just charge anybody without evidence. So in this particular respect, what I would call is, let's be patient. Everybody needs to be patient. Let the prosecution carry out its mandate. Let the judiciary carry out its mandate. The verdict will come, one or the other. But you cannot start ascribing innocence or guilt, you as a political player.
From the periphery.
From the periphery.
With no evidence or no backup.
You have no evidence. But what you are doing, you are whipping what you can call political emotions. And that's dangerous for the country, because the people who he is supposedly defending, they come from a certain community, or they come from a certain family, and they'll be saying, yeah, look, our leader, who is a senator, and who is also a lawyer, has said our man is innocent. Why are you prosecuting him? That, to me, is a very primitive way of conducting public affairs as far as this doctrine of separation of power is concerned.
All right, and I think that rests that case, and we leave it, of course, to the public gallery for you to just gauge for yourself as to how much weight that has. But let's look at something else, and we have a tour of Nyanza that is expected this week by the president, and we do know that Raila has been preparing the grounds for that. But let me start with you, Barack Muluka, and the question here being, of course, the impact of the handshake. We do know that we have seen a semblance of peace and, things being negotiated. However, we do not want to forget some of the things that cause us to be on edge every 5 years, and some of the things that would even be whipped up by emotions of statements like we have had from the senator regarding ethnic profiling. But the question here being, the impact of the handshake in regards to addressing historical injustices. We know that the BBI, the Building Bridges Initiative group, is going round now collecting information on what Kenyans possibly would have to say. But do you feel from where you're seated that we are actually addressing some of those historical injustices, because this tours and the handshake are likely to bear not much fruit if we do not deal with the root cause?
First, I think anything that moves us one step in the right direction is welcome. And therefore, everything that everything good that comes out of the handshake is something that we must appreciate. It's something that we should not seem to be undermining. But beyond that, we must also ask ourselves whether we are engaging in fundamental change, or whether we are involved with palliative interventions that may cure the pain for the time being, but fail to address the fundamental underlying factors that have thrown us where we have often found ourselves. And I say this, Mike, very deliberately, because Kenyans, if their memory serves them well, will want to remember that this has not been the first handshake. They will remember that in February 2008, there was another handshake on the doorsteps of Harambee House. They involved President Mwai Kibaki and the ODM leader Raila Odinga in the wake of the post-election violence of 2007-2008. We must ask ourselves, is there business that we left behind that we did not answer, and therefore that pushed us where we are? And you may want to answer that that is why we have the Building Bridges initiative that is going on. Even in 2008, we had other initiatives. We had the Kriegler report, we had the TJRC report, and we even reformed our constitution, in fact, gave ourselves a brand new constitution. And therefore, there must be fundamental changes. We should refrain from being excited just because we have seen now the two leaders coming together. Yes, we should be encouraged that there's something good that seems to be happening. But beyond that, we must get to the depth of things.
All right. Karanja Kabage, your thoughts on what we should expect from the president's tour of Nyanza? It's not the first time that he's gone to Nyanza, but this is the first time that he's going after the handshake. Are there things that maybe we should expect as a country moving forward, and maybe weighing in on what Barak has just said, we need to get to the fundamentals?
First, state craftsmanship is work in progress. And this country requires two things, very important: stability and order. And I want to commend the president and the prime minister, former prime minister, because for the last 10 months and 4 days, this country has witnessed a political tranquility that has never been witnessed before for a very long time. And if this portends what is likely to happen in the future, then we are in for great things as far as the country is concerned. Now, the visit by the president to Nyanza, which we must admit is the home of the prime minister, it's very significant. And it's significant in the sense that it is a step towards a national reconciliation. A national reconciliation is very, very important because this country is seriously in experiencing developmental deficit. And you can never develop a country in the absence of stability and order, and reconciliation is one of such processes.
Maybe just to pause you there, what makes it significant?
It is significant in the sense that if you look at what happened post-March 9th, what has happened post-March 9th, this country has experienced the sort of political tranquility that is important for building a nation. And I'll give you an example. I want you to look at what's happened in France for the last 4 weeks. And particularly last Sunday. France is developed. But if you look at the press and what is going on as far as tourism is concerned, it has been seriously impacted. And it's a developed country. It has been seriously affected because of political instability that is being experienced in that particular part of the world. People may not call it that, but that's what is happening. Now, the same thing in this country. Whenever we have chaos, the impact to the economy, lack of social development has been tremendous. So we must realize that that's why I said state craftsmanship is work in progress. This is an important foundation of making sure that the country will begin asking itself, what is it should we do to impact on the standard of living of the of Kenyans? And that is very, very important, but you need political stability. You need
to have that done.
Oh, okay. Absolutely, without doubt.
Michael Agwanda, do you agree that it is significant? And above being significant, what is it that you would expect out of that visit that would make that change? Because it could just be another visit where the president goes and, they have a nice political rally, you have people gathered, they cheer, but we go back to our cocoons and things remain as they were before.
I agree with my panelists here that it is very significant. I think in every corner of this country, only people who do not want peace, only people who do not like tranquility in a nation will say that the handshake is not what they wanted. Only people who are very good at throwing stones and actually have adopted throwing stones as their career will say this is not very good because we have no chance to go on the street. And I think the president has a right, and the Constitution allows him to visit every part of this country. It is his duty to know what is happening in every corner of this country in terms of development. But as to what I expect, Mike, perhaps say something different from my colleagues here. Every election we've seen people die in the hands of the policemen. We've seen people die on the street. We've seen baby Pendo being bludgeoned to death right in Nyanza slums. I think when we're looking at this handshake, we also need to answer certain questions, and specifically in regards to people who've lost their life in quest for a better governance of this country. When they lost their life being on the street, and some of them on their bed, because they wanted a better country. They wanted an election that will be devoid of malpractices such as what we saw in 2007 and 2013. And for that reason, we need to ask ourselves these questions. People who were killed by the policemen, people who were killed by the other conflicting parties, like from different parties, for one reason or the other, when will we find justice for their families? We need to answer the questions of whether these men and women will one day be compensated, their families,
and
for heroically going
by the
out.
President to Nyanza able to address that?
It might not be able to address that, but a conversation need to be initiated so that if the policemen were involved in killing certain individuals, those individuals, the government need to own up that there was a mistake. But when you put everything under the rug and hope that people will forget, I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time before another one erupts, and people will remember that our men died. I think it should be in the interests of the Prime Minister and in the interests of the President to discuss some of the injustices that have happened in this country. And during the electioneering period, and say, how do we put an end to this? But what about people who have innocently been killed by the military and the police? How do we ensure that the government will be able to compensate their family? How do we ensure that we will discuss an election process in this country where people do not carry machetes or go on the street knowing that it will be done well? As long as we are not addressing the issue of IBC and the malpractices that is taking place every electioneering period in this country, the handshake will not get its validity.
All right, Barack Muluka, what is it that you'd expect? You're in the political space, and as one of the opposition parties, what is it that you'd expect from this tour, especially to address some of those things? Because like Michael Agwanda rightly says, if we put them under the carpet, then all we're doing is literally just baking them and getting them ready to erupt at the wrong time, which would probably be the election. I mean, we could almost predict that come 2022, this is likely to happen if we do not address the fundamental issues.
Yeah, the tour, the entry point is basically universal health care, which the President is going to be launching from Kisumu. And they are going to be saying, see, we are now good friends, as our good lawyer Kabage says here, there's tranquility. Now the country is at peace, all is good. And which is basically something that may just be no more than a lull in the middle of a storm. Sometimes when it rains, and it's been raining quite a bit last night in all parts of the country virtually, there's this wind of change that seems to blow and tends to drive the storm in a different direction, and you think that the storm has ended, when it's actually just a little lull in the middle of a storm. And so I would expect that when these two meet in Kisumu, they must look Kenyans in the eye, look each other in the eye, and say that we have made some very great mistakes in the past, and we are now going to address those issues, not at a cosmetic level, because as Agwanda says here, these are things which will recur. Look at what's happening in the Rift Valley. We have heard this senator speaking, and we have seen him whipping up ethnic sentiment. Did we not have a tour in the Rift Valley of Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto? Did we not have a tour like that? Did they not say they were very good friends? Did they not say that they had buried the hatchet, that the past was remaining? Did they not say that no Kenyan would bleed again because of post-election violence. Are we not seeing now a senator starting to prepare a community, telling that community that we are being targeted? What business is it that they left unfinished? Agwanda speaks here about IEBC. We have kept quiet. The IEBC continues to conduct business.
As usual.
We are even talking about a referendum to be conducted by the same IEBC that we have been faulting. How are we going to address that? How and when are we going to address the TJRC report that is gathering dust in Parliament? Isn't that an appropriate place that they should have begun? Lawyer Kabwage Karanja has talked about the Paul Ndungu report on land, which is gathering dust somewhere. These are things that we must talk about. When you hear people talking about the Constitution, for example, they're talking about the Constitution only relative to the structure of the executive. Where does this leave the fundamental rights of the people of this country that have caused them to be used as instruments of conflict?
All right, Mr. Kabage, we have the Building Bridges initiative now and the group going around the country gathering information from Kenyans. Is there anything new that they are likely to gather, given that even the previous reports that we've quoted here, you've got the TJRC, the Waki report, the Ndungu report, all those have basically not been implemented? Are these cosmetic initiatives that our politicians are putting on the table to make us feel like there's progress, yet this progress is like a rocking chair, where we are rocking but not moving?
I want to make the following comments. One, when the Prime Minister then and the President shook hands on 9th of March, if you listen to what they said, they actually entered into a covenant where they want to make sure that this country will never have repeat of what has been happening.
Could that be the same covenant that Kibaki and Raila also got into?
Well, I think there is Uhuru and Raila, these two people, they owe it to this country. They owe it to this country because they are at a crossroad. Our nation needs them. And I believe that they have a historical obligation to make sure that this country has stability that will make us grow as a nation. And I want to say the following. Kenya is not a birthday cake. What do I mean by a birthday cake? Where every one of us cuts his piece, we eat, and we forget what was on the plate. Kenya is an infinite institution. It will always be there. And it is upon this first generation, the second generation of our leaders, to make sure that Kenya is founded in a manner that stability and order will make sure that every Kenyan can partake their lives in peace and tranquility.
And is the Building Bridges initiative or group that answer?
Yeah, let me say. And we don't know what report the Building Bridge group is coming up with. But I would hope they are listening to the Kenyans, and they'll also take counsel and advice of the past events that have taken place. And when they come up with their report, it should be a report which Kenyans can celebrate and invest on as far as the future is concerned. Because there is so much potential in this country. And if we want to really benefit the public, it is important that we ensure we have stability in this country. And we will never have stability in this country unless we can fix what is called body politics of our country. And I totally agree with my colleagues, for example, the IEBC. This is one institution that needs to be addressed and addressed comprehensively in a manner that we will not be having the sort of claims and reality of political injustices when it comes to a question of elections. Because elections are very, very important as far as the governance of the country is concerned. But the process that we go through in coming up with who becomes our leader, it's very, very important. And the IBC needs to play that particular role.
Okay.
But what is currently going on, accusations between the chairman and the CEO or the former CEO, it is really pathetic. And,
all right.
and I would invite, and I'd like to invite the DPP and the DCI to investigate these alleged corruption issues in the IBC.
In IBC.
It's very pathetic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michael Agwanda, are we merely dealing with a cosmetic, addressing things cosmetically as opposed to getting to the, issues that matter? We've mentioned the IEBC. We have issues to do with land, which has been a problem that we've had for a long time. I mean, tomorrow is Jamhuri Day, and we are going to be reflecting and maybe getting even a report or an audit of where Kenya has come from. But when we look at our progress, when we look at some of the things that really matter, are we addressing them, or are we so, overtaken by the handshake and the euphoria and romance of the whole idea to a point where we are now forgetting the fundamental things? One of those which has been mentioned, the IEBC.
Mike, as you've rightfully put it, I think we are just cosmetically looking at things and sandwiching them and putting butter on one side and putting jam on the other side, and hoping that that bread that is wheat bread is going to taste like butter and it will not be the bread. What we are seeing in this country is, look at the report of Ouko, the Auditor General. You saw in the dailies just a few days ago that he touched on Eurobond and everything went quiet. Somebody must have said, don't talk about this issue. Don't even mention it. Look at Ouko's report from the counties, from the central government, from everywhere. Every single day, Ouko has been producing these names and individuals that have not properly accounted for the resources that were entrusted to them. Have you seen the government say, this is a smoke and there must be fire, let's go for it? No. The report is presented nicely in a conference room, and after that people go home and business continues as usual. When you cannot act on Auditor General's report that is paid by the taxpayers, and you've employed him, he was interviewed by Parliament, and he was capable of doing his work, and he produces a report, and the government doesn't want to follow those individuals, they don't want to follow those funds, then it is cosmetic. Then it is not done with a good faith to transform this country from a corrupt society to a corrupt-free society. The other things can be done, and we are happy with what the DVP is doing. We are happy with what the DCI is doing. We are happy with what the new Attorney General is doing. But then, when you ask yourself that we have so many reports in this country, and we have Kriegler reports that specifically talked about issues of election in this country and wrote so well about it, and then you have IBC still sitting there and just waiting for the time, and then suddenly we will be having 2 years of general election, and then we say, oh, there's no time for that, let's hire some commissioners, and yet we have time. If the building bridge, if the handshake cannot talk about what is happening in this country, and for information, it is not lack of information. We are well researched. We know our problems as a country. In fact, there is nothing new that building bridge is going to get out there other than what is already in the shelf. The question is, do we have the political goodwill to transact this business of this country? That I think we don't have.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to wind up, but I'll give you 30 seconds each just to give us your closing comments. I'll start with you, Barack.
Yeah, first, this thing where you started, we started off on ethnic profiling. I just want to observe that mathematically speaking, if you put 10 marbles in a bag and 8 of them are blue, 2 are white, if you put your hand in the bag and you want to remove 1 marble, there's no likelihood that you'll bring out a black marble or an orange marble. There are 8 out of 10 chances that you'll bring out a blue marble, and there are 2 out of 10 chances that you'll bring out a white marble. So when we talk about these people who are heading parastatals, who are getting into trouble over corruption. We must ask ourselves also about the architecture of the appointment. We must ask ourselves about the philosophy behind that appointment. Have these people been appointed so that they can do the things that they seem to be doing and which are taking them to court? And when someone says that they are derailing another person's chances of becoming president, is it because they were sent there to build a financial war chest and that financial war chest is now being destroyed? Kenyans must refuse to be misled.
Karanja Kabage, in 30 seconds, please, your closing comments.
Personally, I would like to state the following. It is time we hold people to account. If you are appointed to any position in the Republic of Kenya, you are appointed as an individual. And if you commit any crime, particularly economic crimes in particular, I want the country and the prosecutors in particular and the courts in particular to look at Article 40 on right property, rights on property, right to property, and invoke Sub-Article 6 as far as seizure of that property is concerned, if you are found guilty, because that's the only way that will make people in this country be very cautious when it comes to a question of misuse and abuse of political offices, of the offices which they hold in trust of the public.
All right, your 30 seconds are up. Michael Agwanda, your closing comments, please, in 30 seconds.
I just want to support the DPP with a quest that if you are charged for any corruption in any office in this country, you need to step down until that case is concluded. I think we need to support him in that quest.
Thank you very much. Michael Agwanda, who is a governance consultant, Karanja Kabage, advocate of the High Court, and last but not least, Barack Muluka, Secretary General for ANC. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on Political Point this morning. It is now 18 minutes to 8. This is Morning Express. We're going to take a short break, but do stay with us. We have more lined up for you right here on Morning Express.